Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the fifth of our 2021 legislative session virtual town hall series. Here, I am Luke Tudball. I am the Community Relations Director for Delegate Heather Bagnall. I am standing in just for right now as the delegate is still on the floor of the House. As you know, we're coming up to crossover day this coming Monday. And so there's a lot of last minute work being done in the General Assembly. So I will be here, and I also want to make sure that everyone knows our guests, of course. I'll introduce them shortly. But I did want to acknowledge specifically Max Pierce, who is Delegate Bagnall's Chief of Staff, who is with us, and also Adam Spangler, who is here representing Congressman Anthony Brown. We will be talking about a number of things, but I did want, before that, just to thank you all on the delegates' behalf for your continued commitment to staying safe by practicing physical distancing and safe protocols, and also for your patience as we work through all of the things that we need to get done to get the vaccine out to all of our communities. So we are now in week 9 of the 22-21 session, continuing the work on the COVID relief packages to ensure that we are supporting all of Maryland families and working families from eviction protections, unemployment reforms, and resiliency. I'll put my other teeth in, resiliency legislation for our schools and industries which are so adversely impacted by the COVID pandemic. Last week, as you may know, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion stimulus package. And here in the Maryland General Assembly, we have been working to pass a series of relief efforts, including a reform package of bills on unemployment, and a little bit, hopefully, Delegate Carey, who is also on the floor, will be joining us to speak a little bit more about that. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen the domino effect of delayed enrollment and slowed payments as bills continue to stack up and phone calls go unanswered. Working with our Senate colleagues, we've attempted to get answers on where the logjams are and were, and how we can open up the system. So tonight we will talk about what went wrong in our view, and also what we have done and how we want to move forward. So I'm very honored tonight to be joined by a number of special guests. Congressman Anthony Brown, who is also on the floor, the federal floor, that is, hopefully will be joining us after his vote session in a little while. And he'll be providing us an update on the federal relief and reform efforts. And as I mentioned, Delegate Ned Carey, who is District 31A here in Anne Arundel County and chair of the Unemployment Insurance Subcommittee and architect of the reforms I've just been speaking about. Mr. Ben Burge, who has just joined us, President and CEO of the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
And of course, Mr. Kirk Murray, President and CEO of the Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation. Thank you for being with us, gentlemen. As you can imagine, our panelists are very tightly scheduled, and so we'll attempt to answer all of your questions, but if we can't get to your question, we will circle back to you to make sure that you have answers. As I mentioned before, Max is here on the call with us. We'll be able to field emails if you want to contact the delegate's office. And momentarily, I'm sure he will put the delegate's email into the chat box so that anybody who would like to contact the office is able to do so. If you have a question and you haven't submitted it to us in advance, please feel free also just to type that into the chat as well. And as I said, we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Following tonight's town hall, feel free to email the office if you have any other questions, or as I say, if there are any items that you wanted to talk about, not in a public forum. And with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and introduce Mr. Murray from the Anne Arundel County Workforce Development Corporation to tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives that his organization has been doing throughout this pandemic.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here to talk with you and your constituents this evening. Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation, we have been on the front line in helping Anne Arundel County residents through this very difficult time. It was a year ago this week, actually March 16th, that we closed down our career center in Linthicum Heights. and moved everything virtual, but we have not missed a beat. We went straight to providing the workshops and the services that we provided in that career center virtually. So we have a series of workshops that we've been doing every week to the citizens of Anne Arundel County. And also we've been realizing that we've been getting some international people looking at our workshops that talk about, how to do a resume, what job opportunities are there, how to use LinkedIn, interviewing skills to help people to get that competitive edge that they need to get back into the workplace. We also have been working with several businesses and helping them, as a lot of businesses had laid off workers, there were still quite a few businesses here in Anne Arundel County that were looking for workers. Our hospitals, our famous casino here, Live, at one point they closed, but they were starting to look for workers once they reopened. We're blessed to have Amazon here in the county. They've been looking for workers. So our transportation businesses, they've always been looking for workers. We've hosted several hiring events. We have several that are coming up pretty soon. Matter of fact, a great stable company here in Anne Arundel County, Reliable Construction. We're doing a hiring event for them on March the 18th. They are looking for workers, and not only are they pay good wages, they pay a signing bonus and a retention bonus to individuals who come to work for them. So it's really been a very interesting time for us in workforce development. One of the things that we're very proud of is that besides providing workforce services to individuals, we provide them a little bit of financial assistance during these difficult times. County Exec Pittman asked us to run the Humanitarian Relief Fund using the CARES funding that came into the county. We were able to provide a $500 Visa card to Anne Arundel County residents who were making $25 an hour or less before they were laid off, that had lost employment or had reduced wages due to this pandemic. And we were very successful. We gave out over 4,700 Visa gift cards to Anne Arundel County residents. And some of the responses that we've gotten to those individuals have really helped, really showed how that funding helped them during these very difficult times. Matter of fact, earlier this week, I was doing a town hall with the county exec, and someone typed in a response thanking the county exec for putting this initiative forward, and that gift card helped them buy groceries. So that's been very important to us to be able to provide that assistance. We're now running a new program, the Impacted Worker Support Fund. This is a fund also giving out a $500 gift card. This is in response to individuals whose employment was impacted in November when we had the increased cases, and the county exec had to make the hard decision to put some closures of businesses or restrictions on businesses, and he wanted to make sure that those workers were not unfairly impacted, especially restaurant workers. And so we've been doing this for the restaurants, working in partnership with economic development, reaching out to restaurants and going to restaurant workers. We've given out over 2,000 gift cards with that program. So to be able to provide that financial assistance to Anne Arundel County residents at a difficult time has been something that's been very rewarding for us. We also have been providing assistance with childcare. We know that because of the schools being closed, many Anne Arundel County residents weren't able to go back to go back to work because they did not have stable childcare for their kids. So we were pleased to be able to use some of that CARES funding and continue to use funding to help Anne Arundel County residents who are looking to go back to work, but childcare is a barrier for them. So we will pay up to $250 a week per child for an individual who's looking to go back to work and need assistance with childcare. Anyone can find out more information on our services at our website, which is www.aawdc.org. There's a whole host of services that we provide, upcoming trainings. One of the things that we do is help individuals to get the skills to start, advance, and transition in their career. We do one-on-one career coaching with individuals to give them those techniques that they need, or we can also help people to reskill as they can transition back into the workforce. We know that our hospitality industry was one of the industries that was hit very hard doing this. And we've been running training programs for individuals in the hospitality. They're looking to go into other areas. One of them that we've been running is IT fundamentals, which is the basic skills you need to start your career in IT at a help desk position. And we know that those positions are still growing even now. A lot of these positions are positions that you can get and work from home. So giving people that opportunity to still work and be safe.
Oh, I was muted. Apologies. You have a number of amazing programs, and people should definitely check out the website that you mentioned. Feel free to put that in the chat for people. One of the things I kind of wonder about is, did you find any particular challenges, in scaling up your programs based on the large number of people that were out of work, especially at the height of the pandemic? Or did that kind of sort of seamlessly flow through?
Well, there was two things. One, it was us just changing the way that we do business. I mean, we're used to people coming into our career center and providing services there. So be able to transition those services to virtual was one of the things that took us about a week or so to get done and to get those up and running. So that was the biggest transition. One of the things that with our services, we had a steady flow of people coming in, looking for employment and trying to get help. But of course, as unemployment in the beginning was a challenge. So a lot of people were contacting our office, even though we're not the Maryland Department of Labor who oversees unemployment, but we wanted to assist Anne Arundel County residents in connecting them to unemployment. So we had a lot of calls, and we spent a lot of our time and efforts to make sure that everyone who had questions, we were trying to answer those questions and connect them to the right sources, or be able to look and see what we can do to give them an update on where their unemployment claim was. So that was really what we really were spending a lot of time. We spent a lot of time reaching out to our customers and doing wellness calls on them, seeing how they're doing, connecting them to other resources. In the beginning, people weren't necessarily looking for employment or going back to work. They were looking at, how do I stay safe? How do I get connected to some of those supportive services I need? Food, assistance with my rent, assistance with my utility bills, those type of things. So we played a big role in connecting people to other services. It wasn't until the summertime when things started opening back up, then that's when we got a large influx of people who were coming in looking at, how do I get back into the workforce? And we've been steady with that, with people coming in, looking at how to get reconnected to the workforce. We are one of those services that when people are all vaccinated and businesses are open back up, that's when we're really going to hit our stride. And that's really when we're going to hit our bulk of people who are going to need our services as they look to reconnect to employment.
Well, thank you so much for that brilliant segue. I appreciate that very much, because we're honored to have just been joined by our Congressman Anthony Brown. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. I know your schedule is a little manic at the moment. We really appreciate you spending some time with us this evening. If I can turn to you, Congressman Brown, to sort of give us your federal update. Mr. Murray here had been talking about, reopening process and sort of what that can entail and what we might expect, moving forward. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts and your update from the federal government.
Great. Well, thanks, Luke. And want to thank certainly Delegate Bagnall and Delegate Carey for their leadership. Want to thank everyone on the call who are committed to reopening and returning to that new normal, whether it's in our classrooms, on our university campuses, whether it's in the halls of Congress or in Annapolis, whether it's small businesses, retail, and restaurants. And I think it's just, we certainly need to follow the science, the CDC protocols, and we need to ensure that we've got the resources in place, not only for a safe and successful opening, but to address the needs of families and small businesses, state and local government, while we're on that march, on that path, on that journey to reopening, because we're not out of the woods. I was asked to share a little bit about what's happening on Capitol Hill to address some of the needs in the community. So I thought I'd just take a few minutes, and thanks for having me on this town hall. I just got off the House floor voting. We've got another vote coming up, but I did want to make sure I could spend just a few minutes with you. This has certainly been a very tough year, this pandemic. The loss of lives has been incredible. Over 530,000 Americans and close to 8,000 Marylanders have lost their lives to COVID-19, and the effects of this virus are disproportionately felt in our communities of color. Everything from hospitalization, infection, and death to the lack of vaccination. But this pandemic has also threatened the livelihoods of so many Marylanders in our state. The unemployment rate in Maryland stands at 6.4%. We've improved in recent months, but there are still nearly 170,000 fewer jobs than last year. Families facing unemployment continue to experience chronic issues with Maryland's unemployment system. Too many have experienced a broken website, busy phone lines, and delayed processing of their benefits. And this only adds stress to families who are already worried about keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. This remains an unacceptable failure by the Hogan administration. But with the passage of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan last week, families across our state have a reason to be hopeful. The American Rescue Plan provides a lifeline for individuals facing unemployment. It extends unemployment benefits to Labor Day and continues a $300 weekly enhancement to benefits. It was $600 after the CARES Act. It went down to $400 in December. We've been able to maintain it at $300. Additionally, with tax season approaching, the American Rescue Plan waives federal tax on up to $10,200 of unemployment benefits that an individual received last year in 2020. As congressional Democrats put together this plan, we kept families and our communities at the forefront. In addition to benefits for the unemployed, we provide another round of direct payments of $1,400 to individuals, many of whom have already received that by direct deposit to their bank account. We also increased the child tax credit to $3,600 per child under 6 years old and $3,000 per child up to the age of 17, a move expected to cut child poverty in half in this country. We improved the earned income tax credit for more than 17 million low-wage workers and provide $35 billion to help renters and homeowners stay in their homes, stay in their rental units. But we don't stop there. The American Rescue Plan includes $360 billion to help state and local governments to ensure that they can continue to serve residents. This funding can and will be used to protect the jobs of first responders, public health workers, teachers, transit workers, and other essential workers, and funding that can be used to help our communities build back after this pandemic. The American Rescue Plan recognizes that defeating this virus is essential to our economic recovery. So we put significant funding behind a national vaccination program with more than $20 billion to set up community vaccination sites and address disparities facing communities of color, and $51 billion to expand testing, contact tracing, and mitigation needed to defeat the pandemic. President Biden has set an ambitious goal for our nationwide effort toward full vaccination. 92 million Americans have been vaccinated since Inauguration Day, and 22 million doses will go out next week alone. By May, President Biden has promised to open up eligibility to every American adult. Help is certainly on the way. My district office remains a resource for families experiencing issues with the state unemployment system. We're making significant progress against this pandemic and toward full recovery, but we must remain vigilant to protect the health and well-being of our families, neighbors, and communities. As we wait for everyone to be vaccinated, masking, distancing, and proper hand hygiene remain critical to our fight against COVID-19. So again, I look forward to continuing to work with Delegates Carey and Bagnall as we serve our constituents and do everything we can to ease the challenges, the difficulty during this pandemic. So Luke, hope I haven't gone too long. Thanks for squeezing me in. And I got to run now because I've got votes on the House floor.
We appreciate everything that you're doing and all of your time. And thank you so much for joining us. I know that Alice had posted a question in the chat, so perhaps she can go ahead and email that to you. A question just about, using sort of clean energy jobs to actually bring workers back to work.
Well, let me look. I've got a minute or two. Let me address that. Look, what we've done in the American Rescue Plan and what you're going to see in the American Recovery Plan, because we are going to do an infrastructure bill this year. With or without Republicans, if we've got to use reconciliation, we are going to do a multi-trillion-dollar in investments. And it's going to be driven by a number of principles and goals. One is addressing the issue around climate, resiliency and sustainability, renewable, and creating jobs in a green economy. The other principle will be equity, not only ensuring that we're investing in infrastructure equitably in communities around this country, but those who are partnering with the public sector to deliver that infrastructure, the contractors, the subcontractors, represent America. So equity and climate will be guiding principles in our infrastructures and investment, both what you've seen in the American Rescue Plan, because in that, a lot of those dollars to state and local government can be used for infrastructure investments, but certainly what you see in the American Recovery Plan, which will be later this year. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to address that. Stay safe, everybody.
We will. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
All right.
Take care. So thank you so much to Congressman Brown. I know that Adam is going to kind of hang around a little bit longer. So if anyone has any questions specifically for Congressman Brown's office, I believe that, the email is posted there in the chat. So hopefully that answered your question, Alice. But if it didn't, feel free to follow up with the Congressman's office. And speaking about business and rebuilding back better, as it were, Mr. Burge, how are we working on that in Anne Arundel County?
Well, first, Luke, thanks for having me. I think the two presentations you've heard already from Kirk and from Congressman Brown, I think set up my response pretty nicely. First of all, the work that Kirk and his team are doing at workforce development really work hand in glove with our team at economic development. We're sort of two sides of the same coin. We focus on the businesses, the business owners, to keep the businesses afloat. Kirk focuses on the employees. Working together, we provide a very, what I call a very high floor for Anne Arundel County. We've been far more resilient than most of the other counties in terms of unemployment claims, businesses closing, things of that nature. It's not been easy. Don't get me wrong. It's been a real struggle, but because of our strong baseline, because of our 7 economic drivers in the county, which include Fort Meade, which include our northern industrial sector, the northern part of the county, the city of Annapolis, our hospitals, on and on. A live casino in the hotel. We're able to. We had the infrastructure to really come back quickly, come back strongly, and it's been very helpful. We've also benefited from what the county executive sees as one of the main supports in keeping the local economy running, and that's helping our small businesses. We started off with grants to small businesses that had fewer than 50 employees, and as long as they were using it for COVID-related expenses, we provided them a grant. We then pivoted and helped with our childcare providers, because if you remember back in the good old days, Luke, last summer, we weren't sure if schools were going to reopen in the fall. Seems kind of like a ridiculous mindset looking back on it now, but we knew at the time when the schools reopen, that's when the childcare needs pick up. Because when schools reopen, parents are going back to work. We have those small children who need childcare, and we had to keep them afloat, and we've done that. We then pivoted to our restaurant grant. The timing couldn't have been any better on that one. As soon as the county executive tasked us with providing a restaurant grant program, we were just about to have it set up. The governor came in, and the funding that came from the state almost matched the money exactly that we were putting into it. So we were able to get grants out to about 600 restaurants that were dine-in restaurants, because those were the ones that suffered on the front end of this pandemic before we started to allow back a little bit more on the seating capacity. So we were able to help them a lot. We have been a partner with the state's Department of Commerce with further restaurant grants, with recently a hotel grant. The Department of Housing and Community Development will be working with the county for funding for nonprofits that will be rolling out soon. So we're very active in supporting our businesses that way. It's also important to note that the Recovery Act that was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, that's going to be a lot more grant money coming down to the locals. Pardon me. The federal money that Congressman Brown referenced, I think we're in the, Kirk, you may know this better, like $112, $115 million range coming to the county. A lot of that's going to be going to our small businesses again. So we're going to be a grant issuing machine in the Economic Development Corporation for the next few months. I have an amazing team. We process the applications. Then we transfer the money into the accounts of the small businesses. If you look at just about all the other counties, except for maybe 2 or 3 others, they have a much more complicated process. Takes them a lot longer to get the money out the door. So we are much more responsive. Really proud of the work my team does. And we work very closely with Kirk's team, again, so that we're communicating about where the business vulnerabilities are, how to reach employees. We share databases so we can do our communications with all these folks. It's really a great partnership. And I want to piggyback on something Congressman Brown brought up, which was really, really important. And that is the impact the pandemic has had on businesses that are owned by women and minorities. Back in the late summer, there was a study by the University of California, Santa Cruz, which pointed out that in the first 3 months of the pandemic, 40% of businesses owned by African Americans were either closed or about to close. The number for women-owned businesses was about 34%. For Latinx-owned businesses, it was about 36%, really bearing a disproportionate load of the business closings related to the pandemic in this country. Fast forward a little bit to our grant programs. When we first did our small business grant program, we asked for demographic data. It was not a condition of receiving a grant. We didn't hold up anybody's money because of it. We found that with our small businesses, our grant recipients, 70% self-identified as either women or minority. Now, I'm sure there's some overlap between the two, don't get me wrong, but we feel very confident that a majority of our small business grants went to women and minorities, which is exactly what we were trying to do. Certainly with the child care grant, that is a heavily female-owned business sector. So those numbers certainly skewed female there. But then when we got to the restaurants, we found a lot of the same. We find a lot of the small restaurants, not the chains, but the smaller individually owned restaurants, a lot of them are minority and women-owned businesses. So we're very, very happy with the outcomes that have been achieved by getting this money out the door and in the hands of our small businesses.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about all the different initiatives, I should say, that you all are working on. Did you find that there were lessons learned, from the height of the pandemic to now, where you sort of started off in one vein and were kind of like, oh, that's not working. And how did you sort of adjust as you go along? And how did you adjust as you
the short answer to that is, oh my God, yes, we learned lessons. Pretty much all of the economic development organizations around the state, because a lot of us talk to each other. The ones in the Washington, D.C. area on the Maryland side of the river, we meet weekly. And we all had the exact same problem. When we first did those grants to small businesses, we asked for too much information. We asked for budgets. We asked for planned expenditures. We asked for all this information that we really didn't need to ask. but we asked for it because we thought it was the right thing to do. It slowed the process down a lot, and it took too much time to get money out the door. So what we do now, and we received guidance from the US Department of Treasury, we received guidance from the state and from our Office of Law, that we're allowed to just put a checkbox on the application now saying, will this be used for COVID-related expenses? And if we go back and audit them, it's on the business now to make sure they told the truth and not on us. We have literally shaved months off of our processes of getting money out the door now. We all learned that lesson simultaneously. So the big lesson is simplicity so that we can get the money out the door fast. Another benefit of simplicity is, think of a small business. They don't have a personnel officer. They don't have budget people. They don't have the accountant. They don't have the supply chain manager. That's usually one person doing all of that. Do you think they have time to get through a complicated application process? We learned at the federal level with the PPP program that it was these large corporations that were able to get all this federal money to protect their employees because they had accountants and lawyers who could get through the process quickly. So by keeping it simple, we can keep our small business owners able to get through the process. We try to get them to upload 3 items. Usually it's some kind of license. For restaurants, think of like a food service license, a voided check, and a W-9 form. You get those in, you're pretty much going to get a grant from us. So if we make it more cumbersome, our application levels will go down. And again, think of the audience that we serve. Those are the folks that are going to be impacted disproportionately. So keeping it simple, it helps small businesses, and it helps those small business owners who are overrepresented in the minority and female populations.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one I'll direct to you, Mr. Burge, and the second to you, Mr. Murray, if that's okay. So the first question is, Sarai asked, is there a grant or is there support available for churches that serve as vaccination clinics? And then the second question, Mr. Murray, would be, do you think a commission should be formed to oversee the multiple failures of the unemployment claim process? I said that now, so you have a couple minutes to think about it while Mr. Burge answers.
Yeah, Kirk got the difficult one. So in terms of vaccination sites, we've received a lot of inquiries from businesses, haven't received it directly from churches yet for vaccination sites, and we kick those to the health department. If anybody has I'll be happy to put my email in the chat. And if you want to ask about that, I would be happy to send it to the health department. Right now, the health department has sufficient vaccination sites. But if you have a site that you think would be a useful site, I would be happy to send that to them, and they can put that on their list in case they find there are parts of the county that are being underserved. That's what they're going to look at first. They're going to look at this through an equity lens. So I'll be happy to facilitate that if you have a site.
Or if it was a site, for example, that was serving a specific type of community, like a minority community or an underserved community, that might be helpful.
Yeah, it's going to be the health department who does that.
Okay, Mr. Murray, you had a minute to think about your answer. Should a special commission be formed to oversee the failures in the UI system?
Let me start off by saying this. I am not the Maryland Department of Labor, and it's not my job to defend the Maryland Department of Labor, but this was something that no one ever saw coming. I was in this position during the recession of 2008, 2009, 2010, when unemployment went up. But that was over a period of time. Remember, through the governor's orders, businesses closed all at one time, and all these people were unemployed, and the unemployment system never thought that they would be hit this way. So should there be a commission? Yes, but the commission should understand where the problems were, where some of the solutions came in, and what needs to be put in place in case something like this, God forbid, happens again, and how we could be more responsive. I think that everyone has learned from this. The Maryland Department of Labor, they went through several new computer systems to try to deal with this crisis. But I definitely think that we should look at what went wrong and what were some of the best practices that actually went right, and what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again. So I think that's very important. But I want to pick up on something that Ben was talking about with female-owned businesses. We have the same problem on the job seeker side of the house. We know that women, a large number of mothers exited the workforce because they had to take care of their children. They wanted to be there with their children. They wanted to support them with the homeschooling. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as we start to reopen. How do we really work to get those females back, those mothers back connected to employment as soon as possible? Here in Anne Arundel County, it usually takes two people in the household working, but we want to make sure that we have services to reconnect with them to get them back in that workforce as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you so much for that. And now I know that, excuse me, Delegate Carey was going to speak a little bit about the, unemployment reform bills that he had and others have introduced. But I'm going to pass over to Max Pierce, Delegate Bagnall's Chief of Staff, who is a little more informed, perhaps, than I am probably about some of the bullet points of those bills, just to speak on them briefly. And if anyone has any questions as we go through, I'd ask that you sort of put them in the chat, and we'll try and get to the questions at the end of Max speaking, rather than sort of in between each of the different bills.
So first of all, I'm happy to be here, and if anyone needs specific help with their unemployment, please put your contact information in the chat and I will follow up through the delegate's email. I will also post our contact information again. So please, if you're having any struggles, or anyone else in the district that you know is having struggles with their unemployment, I strongly suggest you reach out to us or your state legislators, as we will be able to advocate for you on your behalf to the department. Sadly, this pandemic has shown that our unemployment system is not set up to deal with this kind of crisis with this many Marylanders out of work. And the General Assembly was sadly out of session until recently. And so they were not able to implement the necessary reforms to make sure the Department of Labor and the Unemployment Office was able to implement the necessary reforms to help the sheer number of Marylanders out of work. There's still some glaring holes, sadly, in the unemployment system, as we can see by the sheer number of people who can't get through, their accounts erroneously put on hold, erroneously marked for fraud, and then unable to get in touch with anyone to appeal those decisions. So the Speaker and Democratic Party has been put forward a series of bills, which we hope to get bipartisan legislation, to reform the outdated system for Maryland unemployment. These bills stress modernizing the unemployment system to make sure it's accessible, and so people can easily track their benefits and actually communicate and put in the necessary weekly certifications. Also improving customer service, making sure that all Marylanders who need to get access to the unemployment system are able to do so and are met with the people who have the necessary training. Sadly, when Governor Hogan hired a bunch of new staff members for the unemployment office, many of these members were not fully trained in dealing with the Beacon system and were not even finished credentialed for the system. So it wasn't as if they were the necessary experts in the field to get Marylanders the help they need. There also needs to be a greater level of accountability, that ensuring that people who have communicated with the department are actually able to get the help they need, and that there needs to be oversight in terms of that their benefits are correct. Because one issue that we've been having greatly is people have been overpaid. And when you're struggling, when you're out of work and the department erroneously gives you more money than you deserve, you are going to spend it on the necessities of food, healthcare, and other securities. And then when the time comes when the department says, oh, our mistake, we overpaid you, you now owe us $3,000. Many people do not have that funds, and it puts them in a very unnecessarily tight financial situation. Another bill that is in focuses on modernizing the unemployment system to prepare for the next emergency, making sure that should there be a second crisis, God forbid, that the unemployment system is designed to handle the sudden increase in claims and not go underwater like it did. I'd be happy to provide a list of these bill numbers. Quite a few of them are sponsored by Delegate Carey. And so when he comes onto the chat, he'll be able to go more in depth about them. I'm also about to put in a chat that if you plan on reaching out to our office about unemployment, the information I will be asking for it from you so that I can advocate on your behalf to my liaisons with the department. So if anyone has any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. In the meantime, if you have more personal questions about specific unemployment claims for yourself or someone you know, please have them reach out to our office or their local state elected officials.
So thank you, Max. I'm not entirely sure if this is a question for Mr. Murray or Mr. Burge. Maybe you probably both have an opinion on this, though. So it does seem that some of these systems are very complex while they're trying to be simple, and yet they end up being extremely complex. And your kind of average layman or average citizen, it just doesn't know where to start or where to go, or, which is left or right. So in your opinion, how do we create a synergy between, your organizations or the types of organizations that you run and similar organizations in, across the state, and then, the federal departments who seem to be somewhat unconnected to real people?
Ben, you want to take that one?
Thanks, Kirk. So it's I think what's important is, first of all, talk about the connection to the federal level, but also the connection at the state level is very important too. And it's not as simple and smooth always as it could be. I think that kind of like what Kirk was talking about earlier, when this first hit, holy cow, we had no idea how to respond. If you remember in the CARES Act, that was $3 trillion that was just thrown out the door. The emphasis was on speed and flexibility. None of us knew what type of guidelines to put in place, what kind of restrictions to put in place. The federal government was shockingly flexible, I'll be honest with you, about how we could use the money. As long, the bottom line was, has to be COVID related, has to be by the end of the year. We thought, you kidding me? Spend $101 million by the end of the year? That's a piece of cake. And then we started getting towards the end of the year, and it was a panic attack because we had some counties that couldn't get the money out the door fast enough. Okay. So what did Congress do? They extended the deadline. What did Congress do with the next relief bill that they passed back in December and signed in January? They focused the money. They said, okay, we're not going to just give it out to businesses. We're going to give it out businesses who provide loans in high-risk areas. We're going to provide grants in areas where it's needed. And they started means testing a lot of the things. So they did a good job of listening to people on the ground like us, and they didn't reach out to us to craft their legislation, but they listened to what was going on. At the state level, we meet frequently with our colleagues at the Department of Commerce. They work with us. They always have been working with us. When they hear things, businesses wanting to come to the county, they refer them down to us. They don't do it themselves. When the restaurant grant rolled out, the secretary had a big discussion, brought all the economic development people on the call to talk about how the grant would roll out and the parameters. We just had a call this afternoon with Housing and Community Development to talk about the grant going to the grant money going to the nonprofits. So there's a lot of that goes on. Yes, it could be improved. Communication could always be improved. Because I think one thing now that we're finding to be a challenge at the local level is folks like us at economic development, and I'm sure my counterparts in other jurisdictions feel the same way, is we have the bandwidth to run one grant program at a time. And now we're getting hit one after the other. Restaurants, hotels, $100 million coming to the county. What's next? What's the next sector? What's the big thing? We can only do one at a time, or else it's going to break down. So That's the kind of thing we're communicating upwards to the state and with our local administration. So I would say the biggest thing that needs to continue to work is the communication. I think from a policy standpoint, we all seem to be kind of on the same page from in terms of economic development, as far as that goes. There's not a lot of daylight between what we see at Congress and what we see locally. And that goes across party lines too, at the local level. So I just think we need to keep the communication going.
I would agree.
Thank you for I'm sorry, I butting in, Mr. Murray. I was going to say thank you for that, and that's one of the reasons for being here. Just before you answer, Mr. Murray, because this might tie into your answer, actually, Melanie had posted a sort of a question come statement, I guess, in the chat here, which is, people that have been in a professional position of being, working and then given that up or stepped away from it to, for example, look after an elderly relative or someone who's sick or whatever, sometimes then they haven't got a job to go back to, or there's, that's a problematic transition in the return. So if you could speak as well a little bit about, what sort of services or initiatives are there for, professionals that have, senior experience, and responsibility, where those positions don't seem to be apparently available?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, as I mentioned before, you had a lot of people who had to step away from their jobs to, as you said, take care of children, take care of elderly parents, and they're going to be looking to go back into the workforce. And this is where workforce development does come in. We can help them with their resumes and interviewing skills, and the way to be able to show that experience to a business. If there's some new certifications or training that they need to transition into a new industry, they may not go back into what they were doing before. They may look at one of our high growth industries here in the county. IT is always a high growth industry here in the county. So helping them to transition into those new occupations, I'm very optimistic that once we get the vaccine and people get vaccinated and people feel comfortable going out in public again and visiting businesses and spending money with businesses will be growing and looking for a workforce. I mean, a year ago, right before this awful thing hit us, Anne Arundel County was at 2.9% unemployment. And a lot of that is because of what Ben talked about, the economic generators that we have here with Fort Meade, with Maryland Live, with the hospitals, with BWI Airport. So because of where we are centrally located, I'm very confident that once people feel comfortable to go back out again and spend money, businesses will start hiring again. Anne Arundel County, during the last downturn in the economy in 2008, 2009, 2010, Anne Arundel County was one of the first counties to bounce back. And that's because of our strong infrastructure that we had that Ben was talking about. I mean, the defense contractors here that support the agency and all that. Those are good jobs. Those are jobs that are always growing. Right now, they're looking for a workforce. I mean, there's a workforce shortage in some industries here in Anne Arundel County right now. So it's a point of looking at how do you transition into those jobs. We're hopeful that Maryland Live Casino and their convention center will get back up and going. And that's a big revenue generator for the county. It supports other people come there. They stay in the hotels. That will help our hotel industry get back. They eat here. That will help our restaurants get back. So I'm very optimistic that once we get people vaccinated, once we get schools open again, that people are going to go back to work.
I'd like to throw one other economic driver that we don't like to talk about, but Kirk and I, we both benefit from. And that is we have really rich neighbors. And people go back and forth across borders. Anne Arundel County ranks 36th in the country in median household income, yet we only rank 4th in our own state. You would think if you're 36th in the whole country, you'd be higher than 4th in your own state. It's one of those first world problems. You know, I like to feel sorry for myself when I talk about it, but it's a great problem to have. We're a very viable county. We're surrounded by other viable counties. It's why so many of the, you know, the state's bond rating and a lot of the other counties' bond ratings are so high. We have a much higher floor than a lot of other places, not just here, but across the state.
So I hesitate to ask this question because it seems like it could be a bit of a Pandora's box. So I just want to put that out there.
Hasn't stopped you yet, Luke.
Well, right. But so there's been a lot of debate and a lot of people asking about the minimum wage in relation to especially the cost of living. So the idea of, you know, live where you work where you live, as opposed to, you know, living somewhere and then commuting to somewhere where you can find a job where you have to live somewhere cheaper and so on and so on. Are there ways that, you know, economic development and workforce development and so on, or all of us, advocates, community groups and so on, can kind of coordinate our efforts to sort of bring some of those things, excuse me, together so that we can actually all try and be on the same page?
So that's an easy one. That's not a Pandora's box at all. I've had this conversation, this very conversation with the county executive a number of times, and he sees economic development and the business community as playing a key role in whatever's done on the minimum wage. He wants us to be part of the messaging. And I don't mean just we regurgitate what the county executive says. He wants to hear from the business community and work together on how to craft that. He wants to move forward on that. But he doesn't want to just step out on a thin branch by himself without working with the community and figuring out a way to move forward on it.
And that's also going to include things like affordable housing, public transportation, you know, accessible communities. You know, there are many communities, I know where I live, for example, we don't have a sidewalk. So if I don't have a car, I can't even get to the Workforce Development Center unless I want to risk my life on, you know, with the cars. But you know, yourself, Mr. Birch, having previously worked with the county executive, probably have a very, you know, very kind of acute knowledge and thought process of that. So if you could speak a little bit more to how your sort of transition has assisted you, you know, from the office of the county executive.
Sure. So I can't say too much about it because there's no proposal in place. What I can say is when the conversation has come up about how to do it, the first thing he thinks about, you know, with his background as a community organizer is it's about the community. And in this case, it would have to be about the business community, not just the employee community. And he recognizes that. And it will be a partnership. What that means is it might not move fast enough on the wage earner side, and it might move too fast on the wage provider side. But he's going to do his best to reach out to everyone, businesses and employees and citizens and, you know, school kids who work and, you know, and really try to move forward together on it, and not just issue an executive order or pass, you know, introduce a bill without full on. I mean, you know how he loves his town halls. You know, there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of conversation countywide about not just if to move forward, how to, well, yeah, it would be an if to move forward, but how to move forward, at what speed, and if to do it at all. There's a lot to consider, and he's very aware of that and will not do it unilaterally without a full-on communication effort around it.
Well, thank you so much. I am aware that we're coming up to 8 o'clock, and I know Max has to jump off the call. So if there are any other, if anyone has any questions specifically for Delegate Bagnall's office, please do email those. The email's in the chat. It's heather.bagnall@house.state.md.us. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of our guests, Congressman Brown, of course, who had to jump off as well, Mr. Burge and Mr. Murray. And just to ask if there are any final questions from our guests here, or any final thoughts from our speakers.
Let me pick up on that last question that you asked about the minimum wage. I mean, everything that Ben says is 100% correct. In the conversation I've had with the county exec about it, he wants to make sure he's methodical about how we do this. But from a workforce development standpoint, even if you went to $15 an hour, that is still not a family sustained wage in Anne Arundel County. So what we really like to do is work with Anne Arundel County residents who are at that lower wage to help them get on a career pathway until they get to a family sustained wage. The Anne Arundel Local Workforce Development Board, which is a board that oversees workforce development activities for the county, is made up of 51% of businesses. We just released our local plan. And we talk a lot about that on career pathways and moving people up to those higher wage jobs. So that's really what it's going to be. It has to be part of the conversation too, is that we know that even at $15 an hour, people can't afford to live here in the county. So how do we move people who are in those entry point jobs, move them to more higher paying jobs? And there's a lot of opportunities. When you talk about, the Congressman Brown talked about the infrastructure bill that's coming in. Construction is still a booming industry. And when you start into construction, you get into an apprenticeship program. I mean, you're making good money. Elevator workers in union elevator workers, they make $100,000 a year and have no debt for college and can support their family. So it's about looking at how do you move up. If you start in a hotel at the front desk, yeah, you may be making $15 an hour, but do you know what a general manager in the hotel makes? I mean, it's up to 6 figures. So it's about moving people up a career pathway and not just leaving them in those low wage jobs, and giving them those opportunities.
And everything Kirk said about people, substitute the word business, and that's what we do. Financing programs. You don't just want to be a small business. Maybe you want to be a big business. Right. And we provide training and programs to do that, which is, like I said earlier, opposite sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
And speaking to that very quickly, I know Tony just had one last kind of final question. We're lucky enough within Maryland to have some amazing technical training programs, apprenticeships, all that sort of thing. What Tony asked was, does the AAWDC work with technical training such as UDEMY or Domestica or some of those, or maybe SMART or some of those more technical or apprenticeship based training programs?
Yes, we do. We definitely work with apprenticeship programs. We definitely work with technical programs. We pay for short-term training, so we don't pay for people to get a college degree or advanced degree. We do pay for people to get short-term certification. We are blessed, truly blessed here in this county to have such a fine institution like Anne Arundel Community College. And we work very closely with Anne Arundel Community College. In about a year, they'll be opening their trades building, the Clausen Center, where there'll be opportunities where people can start their career in the trades. We are all very familiar of the programs that Anne Arundel Community College has with IT, healthcare. So we support the cost. We can contribute to helping with the cost of people to get those short-term certifications.
They didn't get a #1 national ranking by accident.
Exactly.
I was going to say, I would be remiss to say that we shouldn't be extremely proud of Anne Arundel Community College for being voted the #1 community college in the United States recently. So that is awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank very much Kirk Murray. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Burge. Of course, Adam Spangler and Congressman Brown from Congressman Brown's office. Max, thank you for being here from Delegate Bagnall's office. I did just have a message, I apologize if you still be looking down there, from Delegate Bagnall. She and Delegate Carey, of course, are still on the floor fighting for Marylanders, and apologize for not being able to be here. But what we are going to do is do a sort of an update, a part 2 to this. So, keep an eye on the social media and so on, and we will let you know when that will happen, which will most likely be a conversation between Delegate Bagnall and Delegate Carey, specifically about some of the UI reform that they've been working on in the General Assembly. So keep an eye on that. And again, thank everybody for being here, all of our guests, everybody on YouTube, and of course, everybody else who will hopefully watch this down the road. Otherwise, please stay safe, please social distance, please look after yourself and others. And we will see you at the next town hall, which will be next Wednesday. And that one is advertised also on our social media. So take a look at that, and we hope to see you then. Thanks so much.
Thank you.